Watercolor has a reputation for being tricky, and if you're just starting out, you've probably felt that. I've been working as a professional artist and painting with watercolors for over 15 years, and today I'm sharing 25 watercolor secrets that completely changed the way I paint. And these aren't the usual tips. You won't find them on your average beginner list. They're practical, maybe a little unexpected, and honestly, I wish I'd known them when I started. Many of these secrets are expanded on in my book, 101 Watercolor Secrets, which by the way just came out this winter and spent 4 weeks ranked #1 in art encyclopedias on Amazon. So a huge thank you to everyone who picked up a copy and left a review. I'm beyond grateful for your support. I hope it becomes your go-to watercolor guide for years to come. All right, let's dive into my favorite watercolor secrets. I can't wait to hear how many of these are new to you and which ones you already know and use in your practice. I'm going to start with my favorite, the one that will save you a lot of money and a lot of headache. So imagine you're in an art store looking to buy new paints, and there's so many colors to choose from, it's like going to a candy store. But before you spend any money, I highly recommend trying a dot chart. Most major brands offer them. It's an affordable way to test actual pigments on your own paper and see how they behave with water, granulation, and layering. The truth is, watercolor pigments very often behave differently than what you expect just by looking at the color stripe on the tube. For example, these greens may look quite similar on the outside, but on paper, they look very, very different. My personal favorite is this Daniel Smith dot chart. It includes enough paint in each swatch to complete an entire small painting. You can see how many of them I've already tested, and you get nearly the full range of colors just for under $20. It's a total game changer when you're starting out and want to make the right choices for your style and your perfect palette. Now, if you want to get really serious about mixing colors and predicting color behavior, you should never rely on color names alone. Things like Sleeping Beauty or Burnt Orange may sound lovely, but they're completely inconsistent across brands, and they tell you nothing about how the paint actually looks and behaves. For example, take Green Gold. This version from Core looks totally different than the one from Daniel Smith. Same name, completely different color. What does stay consistent is the pigment number, also known as International Color Index. No matter where you are in the world, which store you buy from, you will always find this number on the tube. For example, PR 122 stands for Pigment Red 122, also known to us as Vibrant Magenta. No matter which brand, Daniel Smith, Schmincke, or Winsor & Newton, PR 122 will always behave and look similar. So when comparing or mixing across brands or following tutorials and trying to understand someone else's palette, always go by pigment code, not by name. It will save you confusion, time, and money. Now, the thing that surprised me the most when I was first starting out with watercolors is that the paper we paint on affects our results more than anything, even more than our brushes or paints. Watercolors are designed to be used on cotton paper. If you're not using 100% cotton, or at least 50%, even the most expensive paints can look very dull. And the techniques like wet-on-wet blending, well, they simply won't work the way they should, no matter how skilled you are. And there are 3 main types of watercolor paper. Each gives us a very different effect. Hot pressed paper has a super smooth surface. It dries quickly, which is great for crisp, detailed work. It also scans beautifully if you're planning to make prints. Rough paper has a very pronounced texture. It dries slowly, making it ideal for bold, expressive strokes and granulating pigments. It's very hard to scan though because it has that texture. Cold pressed paper, my personal favorite, offers a perfect balance. It has some texture for softness, it dries relatively slowly, and it's smooth enough for some detailed work. Plus, it dries out slowly enough to allow for beautiful blending. So remember, if you're struggling with your results, it might not be you. It might just be the type of paper you're using. Secret number 4 is to use paper blocks to avoid stretching. Watercolor paper can buckle and warp when you use a lot of water or layering. That's why many artists stretch their paper beforehand. But if you don't want to deal with all this work, try a watercolor block. It's a pad of paper glued on all 4 sides, which keeps each sheet flat while you paint. I love them, and my favorites are from Arches and Winsor & Newton. No taping, no warping, just the joy of painting. If your paper is drying out too quickly, the next tip will be really helpful, especially in dry climates or when working on large wet-into-wet washes. What you want to try is synthetic Auxgall. It's a watercolor medium that extends drying time and improves paint flow. Just add a few drops to your water jar and you will notice smoother blending and softer transitions with increased drying time. My favorite is from Core Watercolors by Golden. Here in Canada, the air gets really dry for a part of the year, and this little bottle helps me keep my paper wet a lot longer while I work. It lasts forever, and it's so worth it if you struggle with fast-drying washes. Secret number 6 is masking fluid. Many of you already know about this wonderful medium that helps us preserve white details. So remember, we don't use white paint in traditional watercolor. And if you want to keep highlights or tiny white areas, you really want to try this masking fluid. It's a thick rubbery medium made with latex, and you apply it to areas you want to protect from paint, like white spots on mushroom caps or sparkle in the eye. Let it dry, paint over it, and peel it off when you're done. It's super helpful for keeping those crisp, clean whites. And I always remind you to never use your expensive watercolor brushes to apply masking fluid. It will dry out the bristles and ruin your favorite brush. Instead, get a rubber color shaper. Mine are from Amazon. They cost just a few dollars, come in different tip shapes and sizes, and last forever. It works just like a brush, but with none of the risk. Perfect for applying masking fluid for tricky, detailed spots. If you want to preserve bright whites or highlights in your painting without using masking fluid, you need to learn negative painting. This technique involves painting around your subject, filling in the background or surrounding shapes while leaving the lighter area untouched. It's a way of defining shapes by painting the space around them rather than the objects themselves. In my opinion, it's the most important watercolor skill to learn after the classic wet on wet. Since we don't use white paint in traditional watercolor, negative painting is how we create everything from delicate white flowers to glowing highlights, leaf veins, fine hair, or intricate background patterns. It does take a little bit of practice because it requires a different way of seeing, almost like reverse painting. But once it clicks, it's a complete game changer. I have a ton of free tutorials on this technique, and I will leave a link to the key ones in the video description below. If you want soft, controlled lines in your watercolor work, especially botanicals, you should try wet on damp technique. The secret is to let your paper sit for a minute after wetting it, so it becomes damp but not shiny. Then use a fine brush with concentrated color. The paint will stay where you put it, but soften slightly at the edges. It's perfect for things like petal veins, fur texture, or soft shadows. A very subtle twist on the classic wet on wet technique, and if you paint botanicals, this trick is a total game changer. I've got a free tutorial on all the different variations of wet on wet technique. It's linked below if you want to dive in deeper. And if you love really textured washes, you just have to try super granulating watercolors. Brands like Schmincke and Daniel Smith make these special pigments with very heavy particles or even multiple pigments inside one tube that separate and granulate beautifully on paper. My favorite is Green Appetite Genuine from Daniel Smith Primatech line. It shifts from dark olive to bright moss and makes leaves look natural and organic. No fancy brushwork needed. When sketching on watercolor paper, use a hard pencil like 3H, 4H, or higher. These types of graphite pencils leave light marks and erase cleanly without damaging the paper surface. For an even better option, you can try watercolor pencils. They will dissolve slightly when you paint over them, so your sketch lines blend right into the final artwork. No erasing needed. And what I found is retractable erasers work best because too much erasing can damage cotton paper and ruin your watercolor blends. Instead, use a thin retractable eraser. They work like a pencil and let you remove just small, precise areas without affecting nearby paint or paper. They're also great for gently lifting masking fluid once your painting is dry. Another important thing is staining versus non-staining watercolors. So some watercolors stain the paper, making them hard to lift, but they're great for layering. Others are non-staining, meaning they lift easily, so you need to be gentle with extra brush strokes. You can also find this information on the tube or the brand's website, and both types have their uses. For example, I used non-staining cobalt blue on the left and easily lifted clouds with a tissue. But on the right, I used phthalo blue, which is highly staining, and no matter how hard I try, I could only bring back some of the white. It's because staining phthalo sinks into the paper and stays there. Now, did you know that some watercolors fade more than others? If you want your artwork to stay vibrant for years, you need to pay attention to lightfastness. Watercolors are rated from 1 to 4 for how well they resist fading over time. Some gorgeous colors like opera pink are fugitive, meaning they will lose intensity with light exposure. If you use fugitive colors, avoid hanging your work in direct sunlight and use UV protective archival glass to keep it safe. It's a small step that makes a big difference in how your work ages. Our next secret is all about flat brushes for lifting your watercolor. While you can do most things with a pointed round brush, flat brushes are incredibly useful, especially for lifting paint and creating soft highlights. Whenever I paint dark backgrounds or dark, shiny objects with lots of highlights, I keep a clean, flat brush nearby. I dip it in clean water, blot it on the tissue paper, and gently drag it across the painted surface to lift my pigment. It creates a soft, blurred highlight, like the shiny reflection on a wet sea line. It's also great for creating distant shapes in your background or fixing accidental splashes of paint. Simple technique that adds depth and control to your work, definitely worth having a nice flat brush in your toolkit. Now, if you struggle with shaky hands when painting fine lines, try a rigger or a sword brush. These long, narrow brushes are designed for extended, fluid strokes, perfect for tree branches, petal veins, or even calligraphy. In my work, I find them especially helpful in botanical art, where precision matters the most. And I use mine all the time, like in this blue orchid piece, to create smooth, elegant lines, even after way too much coffee. It's a total lifesaver for steady, detailed work. Now, if you love painting outdoors or maybe want to bring your brushes along while traveling, retractable brushes or collapsible brushes are a must-have. They're very compact, mess-free, and protect the bristles when you're on the go. Most brush shapes come in this format, and my favorites are from Escoda. You can paint, rinse, and safely close them without damaging the tip. They're perfect for plein air and will always be a great addition to your travel kit. Our next secret is about brush care. So over time, your watercolor brushes will lose their shape and precision, and you may already be experiencing this with your favorite brushes. To keep them in top form for a long time, you want to use a good brush soap every couple of weeks. I especially recommend brush soaps made with conditioner. Mine is from Escoda and it contains natural olive oil. It gently cleans, hydrates, and reshapes my round brushes, helping them last longer and perform better. It's a small habit that will save you a ton of money, keep your brushes nice and pointed, and your colors clean and vibrant. You've probably seen this happen when water hits a freshly painted area. It creates a ring where the water drop pushes the pigment outward. As a beginner, it might feel like a mistake, but it's actually one of the easiest ways to create organic texture in watercolor. This is called blooming, and when used intentionally, it adds softness and depth without complicated layering. All you need is one pigment and clean water. It works especially well with granulating or mineral-based pigments like this Rhodonite Genuine that I'm using on flower petals, or Green Apatite Genuine and Cascade Green that I'm using on the leaves. These heavier pigments naturally settle into beautiful textured patterns when you add clean water drops. It's a simple, quite magical effect, so embrace the blooms when they happen and use them on purpose in your work. The next secret is about an interesting phenomena that happens with all watercolors. It's called the drying shift. So have you ever noticed your paintings look vibrant while wet, but a lot more dull once they dry? This is what the drying shift is about, and it's totally normal in watercolors. As the water evaporates, colors will lose some of the brightness and vividness, and the colors may even shift slightly in hue. This happens with every brand of paint, even the most expensive ones. To bring back the vibrancy, just apply another glaze of the same color over the dry layer using the wet on dry method. It will boost saturation without overworking the paper. So next time your colors fade a bit, don't panic, just glaze. Now let's talk about good and bad reference photos. A good reference photo will always be a game changer for the way your work turns out. Subjects like white animals or yellow flowers are particularly tough to paint because they often end up looking flat. And the key is to choose a well-lit reference photo with strong shadows. The best reference photos are taken during the so-called golden hour, when you get very natural, obvious shadows. These shadows help us define the form, making it easier to capture depth and structure of the object we're painting. For example, this daffodil on the left is very difficult to paint. There's no contrast. No matter how skilled you are, your washes will end up looking a bit flat. But the one on the right has great shadows, which will instantly add dimension and make it easier to recreate on paper. When I paint light subjects, I always look for these clear shadows. That way I can paint the shadows and let the highlights shine bright. And remember that shadows are never gray. One of the biggest mistakes beginners make is painting shadows with flat gray colors. But in real life, shadows are full of color. White subjects often reflect the cool blue of the sky, so if you're painting snow, try using warm and cool blues instead of dull grays. For yellow subjects, reach for violets and purples. They will give you depth without killing the color. And don't forget, nearby objects reflect the color into the shadows as well. So keep an eye on your surroundings. They will sneak into your shadows in the most beautiful way. For a deeper dive, you can check out my white shell shadow tutorial. It's also linked in the description. The next thing was a huge revelation for me when I was first starting out, and it's all about using primary colors. You've probably heard that you only need 3 primaries, red, blue, and yellow, to mix anything you like. And yes, you can make a wide range of colors this way, like mixing yellow and blue to get greens, for example. But then why are there so many tubes in the art store? Do we really need all of these colors? Honestly, probably yes. And it's not just about convenience of having pre-mixed greens. Sure, it's nice to have a reliable green on hand. My favorite is Hooker's green. But more importantly, different sets of primaries create very different moods and affect your style in a very big way. Take a look at these 2 color wheels I mixed. One gives soft, natural tones. It's great for portraits or realistic landscapes. The other one is bold and vibrant. It's more suitable for florals, botanicals, or decorative work. So experiment with your primaries. They shape your entire palette, and don't be afraid to add additional colors to your work, especially if you're searching for that unique style. There's no perfect palette. It's always a work in progress. So allow yourself to explore, swap out the colors even if you're just using 3 primaries, and adjust as your style develops. For example, some watercolors like iridescent and interference pigments don't fit into classic primary palette at all, but they're absolutely worth exploring. These specialty paints create beautiful shimmering effects, especially if you're painting on black or toned paper where their sparkle really comes to life. They're not essential for realism, but they add a magical touch and open up a whole new world of creative play. Perfect for decorative work and joyful experimentation. Let's talk about background tricks and all the different things that you can do with watercolor to create different styles of backgrounds. If you want a simple, beginner-friendly background, you want to start by wetting the area around your subject and then dropping some blue-leaning colors. Cool blues naturally recede into space, helping you create depth with just one layer. For more detailed edges, you want to pre-wet the area around the subject with clean water. This helps the paint flow and blend more naturally. And if you're going for a dark, very smooth background, do it in layers. Apply a light wash first, then let it dry completely, and then add a darker wash on top. This will mask imperfections of the first layer and give you better, darker, more smooth coverage without overworking the paper. The next tip I wish I've learned sooner, because there's nothing more frustrating than smudging your paint with your hand or transferring oils or moisture to the paper while you're painting. You may find that wearing this special glove or so-called smudge guard while painting will protect the surface and help you avoid accidents. I love them because they keep my hands clean, prevent heat, dirt, and oils from affecting how the paint behaves, especially on delicate wet washes. I highly recommend it. It's a small habit with a big payoff in terms of control and cleanliness of your work. My final and possibly the most important tip: don't try to finish your painting in one sitting. Watercolors work best when we build them up in layers, with each one drying fully before we add the next. So start with light, diluted washes to block the colors, then slowly add darker tones and detail. Because watercolors are transparent, layering lets you build depth, realism, and texture without mudding up the surface. It's the best way to stay in control and get beautiful results. So there you have it, 25 watercolor secrets. I hope at least a few of these were new to you or helped you rethink something you've struggled with. If you want to go deeper into any of these topics and truly understand what's inside your paints and all the different techniques and possibilities of watercolor, I cover these subjects in detail along with lots of examples in my new book, 101 Watercolor Secrets. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know in comments which one of these secrets surprised you the most.